What's going on, everyone? It's Bales, and back to another episode of just the first episode ever, the trade period. We'll go through everything, and I've got a panel with us, as you can see, obviously going from top to bottom. We got James, who finished second overall last year. James, mate, how you going?
Good, Bales. How are you?
Good, thank you. And then the bottom left, we've got Jago, as you know, from Hatchat, mate. How you going?
Oh, I'm all right, mate. It's nice to see these boys wearing their hats. So I'm still waiting for mine. It's not coming this year, I'll tell you that much. But hopefully in the coming seasons, and we put some good work in tonight for everyone else to help them along their way, mate.
Oh, mate, my fingers are crossed I can get AFLW Fantasy so I can actually say I've got a hat. And then we've got Monk. Mate, how you going?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Good to finally have the hat arrive, and yeah.
Perfect. So it's a very, very early video because football season didn't start for a while. But I thought with the trade period just finishing, we'd get stuck into some of the trades and stuff. So we'll just run through that. If you're watching live, if you have any questions, live chat, I'm sure we'll get to them throughout the episode. So we'll start off with the Mighty Crows. Very happy with who we got. So he's the one that we got. Obviously not fantasy too much. Do you guys see him potentially affecting anyone at the or anything like that? Is there any interest with Adelaide at the moment?
I think he might affect a little bit with the rotation between Rankin and Rochelle. I mean, they eventually both of them will push through and get some midfield time. I expect similar to how Butters and Rosie pushed through the midfield for Port Adelaide, but not really relevant for Classic for next year, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Rochelle in particular, he looked really good with those midfield rotation minutes kind of on the last few games that he was playing. So I would be surprised if they don't give him more time this year. And It could be an interesting play long term, but agreed, he's probably not value. I don't think he's going to get enough rotation to see an immediate impact on the scoreboard.
Probably.
I reckon there'll be like a 4 to 6 week period somewhere in the middle of the season where they'll be the perfect time to jump on, and then they'll get their play in the midfield, and then that's it. Like, I wouldn't be starting with them, but there'll be a time, I reckon.
No, I agree. I think, as a lot of people said, I think that they will probably rotate. Yeah, Rankin and Rochelle will be those guys that rotate through. There'll be not too much. And then obviously, then the part left was Billy Frampton. So that probably doesn't really affect anything from Adelaide. So we'll probably move swiftly on because not too much really with the Crows there. So we'll move on to Brisbane. So the big one, obviously, Jake, mate, your team namesake, Josh Dunkley, obviously has gone to the Lions. So so obviously we've got to know if he's going to be a forward, which Warney said that there's a chance that he gets it. But do you guys think that he'll be a forward mid, or do you think even if he's just a straight mid, is he still a potential option as a midfielder?
First of all, I want to thank you, Bales. I reckon you got me on just for this question, which is much appreciated, just to remind me, as everyone else has for the past few weeks. Look, I think there's definitely a chance that he gets it. I think we trust Warney on that one. I think if he gets it, he'll be a mid forward, and obviously he's a tasty pick, just the same way he was this year, the most consistent player in any line over the first few weeks of the season. And I don't see him being too different at the Lions. I think the interesting thing is he's shown that his impact is as a mid forward. I think as a midfielder who slides forward at time to time. I don't know that he plays pure midfield time. I'm interested to see what happens to Jared Lyons. I think there's a lot to play out in that Brisbane side. I think McCluggage probably sticks to a wing a little bit more, but I think it could be a really interesting dynamic. They're going to look a lot like us this year, where someone's going to be pushed out at all times. Not everyone can be at every CBA, which would be interesting to see with any Brisbane Lions in the team, I think.
It did look like the Lions were starting to push Lions more to the outside out of the CBAs, especially as they came into finals, because they pushed Berry through for the first couple of games. Maybe they just replace Berry with Dunkley and Berry just gets a chop out every now and then.
I can see that.
I agree. I can see that happening.
Yeah. Are you guys going to, if Dunkley is a forward, will he be your pick-up forward? Are you guys going to look at starting him, or do you think maybe he's a bit expensive, a bit unknown, may watch pre-season, potentially not start with him, and then may wait to pick him up after a few rounds?
I don't think Brisbane pay what they paid for him as if they were going to use him in the forward line. I think he's going to play midfield, the same way he did with the Dogs. Even if he plays off the half forward flank, he'll push into stoppage. He'll get a lot of tackles. I don't think you need to question it. If he's a forward, you probably name him. I don't think I could select him as a midfield only player just with the likes of some of the guys I'm sure we'll talk about tonight. But yeah, I think as a forward, you just don't think it. I mean, I'm a bit biased, but don't overthink it.
I tend to agree. If you're selected as a forward, then there may only be a couple that can actually pump out the 105 to 110 average that he can actually pump out. So I think it would be a no-brainer pick.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Jack Gunston, I don't think there's too much interest. Probably more of a draft guy. Maybe you could pick up late. Is that probably an agreement there? Probably just a draft relevant one, maybe late slider.
Yeah.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yeah,
and then
not too much.
And obviously the players that left, Tom Berry and Dan Mcstay, which I'll discuss them later, but they don't really affect anyone in Brisbane's arm. It's just that midfield mix, as you said, Jake. Just depends who's going to be in, who's going to get in the mix with Lyons potentially still there, and then obviously Dunkley coming in, playing well in the final. So we'll have to see how that one does shake out. Moving on, so Blake Acres, I guess again that's probably a draft relevant one. Are we all in agreement with that? He's probably a bad pick as a late round mid selection.
Yeah, that's about it, I reckon. I mean, probably won't do anything special.
I can't really see him improving on an 80 to 85 that he had at Freo. I mean, Carlton don't play as much of a chip mark game style as Freo do, so I think he'll probably move down in his average a bit.
Yeah, I'd probably tend to agree. But the one thing that probably does do we think that pushes Sam Walsh into, because he did spend a little bit of time out on the wing and whatever, or do you think that maybe might get rotated forward and be that fourth midfielder that goes up to stoppages, or do you see that midfield mix potentially being mixed up with maybe a guy pushing from a wing in midfield?
I think the guy who comes to mind, and it comes to mind every season, that has this potential but just never gets the full-time opportunity is Matt Kennedy. We saw it again this year. There were some incredible scores that the man put up, and then he was sliding out to the wing and onto the half-forward line, and I feel like this is another guy that jumps in front of him in the pecking order. I think Sam Walsh is an interesting one. I think there's no doubt his talent's there. Obviously, Ed Kerno coming to the end of his career. There's enough names in the mix, but between Hewitt, Cripps, Chera, Walsh. Acres is going to stay on a wing. There's your full midfield. There's no doubt about that. So out of those guys, who's going to be your winger? Walsh probably stays out there for me.
Seemed like Walsh is kind of pushing into the midfield rotation off of half forward at times, especially later on in the season. And that was how they were getting an extra midfielder in. So I think Acres comes in, occupies the other wing spot, and you've got Lockie O'Brien on the other wing. And it just means that Walsh might actually spend a little bit more inside rather than getting outside, which could actually hurt his score. Might mean he gets a few less +6s, but I think it'd probably even out.
Yep, beautiful. And then obviously Will Setterfield left as well, so we'll discuss obviously him with Eston, but again that doesn't affect really because he was sort of in and out a little bit of the side last season. So Collingwood, so obviously this is going to be a big one. So I called him one of the biggest locks last year. A few people disagree with me, and I got a bit of slack, and people saying, "Oh, he's not a big lock, he's not going to do well." But Tom Mitchell, I've locked in already, and the game hasn't even opened yet. I just think priced at 96.3 that he'll be priced at. I think he'll go 105. I don't know if he's not going to go 120 like he has in the past. Obviously, as people have said, Collingwood are a more they don't use it a much kick mark as Tom Mitchell is normally got a lot of possessions. But what do we see Tom Mitchell potentially doing, averaging for Collingwood next season?
I reckon he's probably got the biggest range out of just about anyone that I like. Not that I've really been keeping up with it at all, but I could see him doing 90. I could see him doing 120. Like anywhere in there would not surprise me. I have no read on it whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it's one to watch. I think he'll fit in and will definitely be in the Pies' best 22 to come round one, and he'll be getting midfield rotation. But the question is the Pies' play style and system going to be in kind of allow him to pump out those 120, 130, 140 scores that he was able to do when he was at Hawthorne? And I don't think that he has the absolute ceiling that he'll have in the past, but can he score at 105, 110 and provide enough to have value? That's probably the big question. And I'm hesitant to say yes at this stage. I don't think he can, but that's not to say that he won't.
Yeah, I think there is upside, but at this point in time, I'm not sure I'd be looking at almost any Pies player just because of the unknowns that come in with the guys they've brought in, the guys that have been moved on. There's so much flexibility, for guys like Crisp. Does he go back and play exclusively in the back half? Does someone like Taylor Adams get his body fit, and does he even fit in best 22 at this point? Pendles. There's so many guys that I just ask what's actually going to happen, and I think until we see preseason and until we actually see consistency, I'm not really sure I'd be keen. But as you boys have all said, the upside with Tom Mitchell is no doubt there, priced at 96.
Maybe it's just because I just want cheap bacon. That might be why. I'm eating bacon while I'm in the US. The bacon's great here, so maybe I just want the cheap bacon for the pig. So, I think it is a pre-season watch, but he will be in my starting side. I can't really say he's one of the biggest locks and not put him in my starting side. So I've got to probably sort of start on the hill and see if I stay on the hill. So Dan Mcstay obviously comes in. Does that, obviously with the midfield, we're going to be unsure, but does that potentially, and obviously Bobby Hill coming in as well, does that mean, I know Jago was obviously playing full-time mid, but does he become even more of a just staying more around the ball instead of being that midfielder that drifts forward? Or do you think that a bit of an unknown midfield forward, we just can't really get a read until we see Collingwood play?
Yeah, I reckon it's too hard to tell at the moment. If it was me, I'd probably have a little bit more inclination to leave him more on the ball, but he's still, probably a top 10 forward in the game if he's playing in the forward 50. So when you've got such an asset like that, how can you not play him in the forward line? So, you know what I mean? It's tough.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the dynamic in any role at the moment, I just can't pick. They've got plenty of talent in their forward 50, assuming everyone's fit. I'm trying to think who's going to play on the other wing. That's the kind of role that some of the younger guys were playing. Obviously, Josh Dacos on one. So I'm wondering who gets pushed out there. I don't think it's Degoe, don't get me wrong, but I'm intrigued as to who takes that role, because I think that will depend on who ends up in that last midfield rotation spot, and whether Degoe stays forward, whether Crisp stays back, will be that second wingman, I think. So that's the watch. See if someone locks that down.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. Yeah, I'd probably early pick for the other wing. It might be like a Noble, or maybe they push a Nick Dacos up to a wing and not so much. But again, as we've said, as you guys said throughout with Collingwood, is just to wait and see with a few big ins, because pretty much all these guys are going to be in too. And then Billy Frampton as well. He's obviously just probably more of insurance sort of for the back, just a bit of depth, so not really too much fantasy relevant. And then obviously Brady Grundy as well, leaving to Melbourne. Still don't really get that, but we'll talk about him later. And then Ollie Henry to Geelong. But does that make, obviously with Grundy Gorn being in the same team, then probably not going to be options? Is Darcy Cameron potentially an underpriced option in the ruck? Obviously, he'll now be the main ruck with Mason Cox there. Is that a potential play? Or again, just wait and see how Collingwood are and then maybe make that determination in pre-season?
Yes, he is definitely an underpriced option considering how he started the season compared to how he ended it. He went at 90, 95, second half of the season when he had the number one ruck role. Grundy's gone. Cox is a year older, and they brought in a key forward. Like, it's nearly a smash play. Definitely one of the 3 or 4 rucks to be considering starting next year that are up at the premium end.
I think I have that little bit of a flag, just the way that Mason Cox finished the season, seemingly taking the mantle somewhat. It confused me. I'm sure it confused a lot of people. Sometimes we just can't tell what footy clubs are going to do. I think I know who I'd be playing as my number one ruck. I know what we've seen from Darcy Cameron as number one ruck, so it seems like a no-brainer. I think we just have to keep that Mason Cox eye just to check. But nonetheless, even if he's playing 50, 60%, we've seen the scores that he finished. He's going to be 10 points underpriced based on that at a minimum, with a potential 20-point upside if he manages what he did throughout the guts of the year for the entire 2023 season.
Do we know what he actually finished as an average? Is it in the 80s? I feel like it was in the 80s.
I think it's 83 off the top of my head. I'm just getting it up here.
No, that's not.
81.9.
Yeah,
Yeah.
81.9.
So you'd think
so
definitely underpriced. You'd think.
Just a prediction for Cameron, do we see him going 90 plus as an average? If he gets the number one ruck role, obviously.
I could see 90 to 95.
I could definitely see 90 plus.
Oh, I think if he gets the number one ruck role, I think you're looking at 95 plus. I think the fact is I don't think he'll have number one ruck role every week, and that's why I probably see him the 85, 90, but that's still underpriced. So,
yeah, no, I agree. Fun to
I think
keep an eye on.
The other thing that helps him is
Yeah.
the fact that all the other ruckmen are going to be coming down. Like the other three best ruckmen, Grundy, Gawn, Darcy, probably all going to be trending downwards.
agreed.
We'll talk about one other. Actually, no, we'll leave. I was going to talk about another ruck. We'll talk about that later on. So we'll move on to Essendon. So Will Setterfield moves there. I don't know what he'd be. I don't exactly know what his role would be. I don't know if he would be an option in Classic, but what first thoughts of the Will Setterfield to Essendon? Is there any interest at all? So averaged 68.9 last year, played 12 games. So he'll obviously be potentially underpriced. Do we see him playing midfield, wing? Have no idea. What do we see with Setterfield?
I'm pretty bullish, if I'm honest. I've always liked him. He's probably been in a lot of my draft sides, to be honest, because he's that fringe player who just has shown there's a bit of talent there and just hasn't quite been able to crack into it. And I think that the Essendon midfield, there's definitely an opportunity there. I think I probably see him starting out on a wing, but maybe rotating through with some CBAs as well. So I think for me, he's maybe 20 to 23 on their list, though. So it really just depends what mix they're running with. But I think he is probably squeezing into the best 22, and I think he's definitely underpriced at that. A bit of a risk starting Classic, but I always like one or two. And at the moment, he's definitely in those vying for that spot.
Yeah, I definitely think he's underpriced. Like he's shown in the past that he can easily push 90 to 95 when he's been given the role. Probably one to be considering as a mid-price option through the midfield. Talking to some Essendon mates and reading some stuff online, I mean, they've been crying out for a big-bodied midfielder who can actually provide some protection for Parrish and Merritt. I think that he might just come straight in and occupy the mid-time that they were trying to give to, say, Caldwell, Langford, and Stringer, and just be inside of that best 22 from round one.
Yeah, Warney says, so on the DT Talk article, Warney wrote, if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do. Warney's got through all the 2022 averages, projected prices for next year, and then his fantasy verdict on each player. And it says that he projected Will Setterfield to be about 578K. So it is definitely potentially he could be, and he could be one of those mid-price options that we have. So definitely one to keep an eye on. Sam Wiedemann, I guess that's just probably not Classic, could be draft relevant. Is that probably what everyone sees?
Yeah, just draft relevant.
Yep. Cool. And we'll move on to Freo. So Josh Call, probably not. He might not even be best 22, so probably not too really sure on him. So Luke Jackson comes in. Monk, you alluded to that before. That just touching Sean Darcy whatsoever.
Yeah, I think it just cuts Darcy's ruck time down from, say, 80 to 85% down to 70 to 75%. I think Darcy will still get the majority of the ruck time, but I think Jackson will probably get the ruck time when the ball goes forward for Freo and might chop in for 3 or 4 CBAs every quarter in the centre.
Yep. And then the other one that moved there as well, sort of came a bit out of nowhere. So Jago Mira. So he's probably, again, a draft one. He's still 10 points under, like potentially underpriced. He could go 90, 95, but I guess that we're probably going to all agree that to be priced around that 85, mate, you're probably going to be averaging 100 plus from here. And I guess that bit of an unknown with Brayshaw, Brody, Sarong, like they've got plenty of midfielders there. Are we just sort of not worrying about classic and maybe just again a bit of a late flyer in draft, like sort of middle to late draft?
Yeah, I think I might say I'd probably say middle. I don't know that I'd push him to the late. I think I'd be a bit more speculative on him in the draft space because we know he does have a ceiling, and we do know they're going to. I mean, yes, they didn't get it to have to pay much, but I don't see him averaging, sub 90. I'd say he'd probably be 80, 90, and whilst not enough in classic, I think that's very reasonable mid rounds in your draft leagues.
I think he's just a Mundy replacement.
I disagree. I reckon, I could see him going real strong for the first eight weeks or something. Over the season, probably going to average around that 90 to 95 mark. But I could see him having a real solid patch of 100 plus. He's just that type of player, I reckon. Whether you actually start with him or not, is the actual thing. But I'll definitely look into him when it gets to the preseason.
Yeah, if you heard the bloody rattling in the background, the cleaning ladies here, it's 6 normally when they do the rounds and in all the rooms and stuff, so you can't really escape anyone around here. So, but yeah, so and then in terms of players who left, Blake Acres, I don't really think that off the top of my head, unless any of you guys can go. I don't think that has any fantasy implications really for anyone.
The only thing I could think of is it might mean Chapman pushes up further onto the wing, which might increase his output because it allows them to kind of have one less halfback or down back.
Yeah, over Jordan Clark, do you think?
Yeah, I think Freo want Jordan Clark off halfback more because of his running carry, whereas Chapman's just an elite kick. I think him and Young will probably push further up the ground over Clark.
Yeah, well, you're the Freo guy, so you're going to have sort of a little bit more knowledge about that. So yeah, definitely on with Chapman there, and whoever takes that wing role. So straight swap, lob out, Jackson in. Griffin Lowe has too much of an effect. Maybe Jay Amos obviously gets more of a game. I know that they were both playing in sort of the finals together. I think Jay Amos would be a little bit too expensive. I think he played a couple of games in 55 or something like that. So I don't know if that makes necessarily him an option. So, and then obviously Lloyd Meek is out. He was just depth. And then obviously Darcy Tucker, obviously, who wasn't playing either. So we'll move on to Geelong. So probably the weirdest trade and most one-side trade I've ever seen. Jack Bosen picked 7 to Geelong for a third-round pick. I still can't really get my head around it. I was imploring Crows to go after it, but we didn't go for it. But anyway, Jack Bowes at Geelong. Do we see him as a potential underpriced option? Is he going to be best 22? What are our early thoughts on Jack Bowes?
I think yes and yes, but to what extent is yet to be seen. Obviously, we're used to seeing him come off the half-back line. They've been flagged that they might use him through the midfield. I think all of the above roles is beneficial. We've seen a lot of Geelong halfbacks and defenders find their way to rack up scores. Zach Tui, always an underpriced and cheap get late in your draft rounds. And with the age going through that side, he's someone, if you've got a keeper league, I'd be very, very hot on, because I'd say in a couple of years' time, he'll be an absolute superstar in that side, if I'm honest. But this year, a little bit more of a watch just to how they're going to use him. But I would expect him to be playing if his body's right.
Yeah, priced at 500. I was just going to say priced at 574k. That's what Warner's got him projected for next season.
So a high mid-priced option. Then I think the biggest issue with him is that it's probably this year, and then you'll have to wait a couple of years, and then it's a year in the future, because I mean he'll come in with the defender status this year. Question is, can he push up to being maybe a top 10 to 15 defender, and what's his role actually going to be? I mean, they've flagged mid-time, but that could mean he gets a rotation there for a couple of CBAs every now and then, or it could be he's the Joel Selwood replacement. It's hard to know.
I think maybe not to quite the same extent, but it screams a little a little bit of George Hewitt to me. Maybe definitely not to the same heights, but somewhat comparable.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think in the preseason, Ollie Henry, I don't think really too fantasy relevant. He's going to be under 400k, but can he? I think Warney said he's only scored over 80 twice, so in his career, so I'd probably being an option unless in preseason he gets a couple of big scores or something. Then, but no, is there any interest for him? Is he just another potential player? He might get CBAs if Geelong goes forward, or Joel sold out. Does maybe Tanner Bruhn get CBAs? What are our thoughts on Tanner Bruhn heading into next season?
Bit more hesitant on Bruhn than Bowes. I think Bowes, a couple more years in the system, bit of a bigger body, probably more likely to go straight in, and Bruhn might have to bide his time a little bit and find his way into the Geelong system before he becomes best 22.
Yeah, that's my gut feel as well.
Again, I'd probably be keen enough in a keeper league that in a couple of years he's going to have a big impact, but I would not be so sold for 2023.
Yeah. No, it says predict 446k. So if he's under 400 potentially, but I think he's in that bit of an awkward price range. So you probably do want to see something pretty big first before you really look at jumping on him. And then the only one left Geelong was Cooper Stevens. So obviously we'll chat him when we get to Hawthorne, and that doesn't really have an effect too much on the reigning premiers. So Gold Coast. So Tom Berry. I'm just trying to get up what Warney would have as his projected price here. But while I find that, is he a potential cheap option?
I'm not a fan of either. I don't. God, you've got Fiorini still not getting games, for goodness sake. I just can't see how Tommy Berry suddenly slides into the side. Same with Ben Long. Like I think Ben Long probably plays, but is his role particularly fantasy relevant? It wasn't at the Saints. I'm not fussed on either of them, frankly.
I think Ben wants.
Same with me.
I'm a little bit more of a keeping an eye on Ben Long, because the fact is that they've brought him in to kind of come off that half back flank where they've had injuries to Powell and to I forget the other half back who they both injured themselves on long-term injuries. And if he's
my mate DC's friend Buderick, is that who we're talking
about? No, not Buderick.
I just wanted to give him a mention in case DC.
Yeah. But if he's coming off that half back flank, the Suns have shown that they can play a chip mark style, and he could rack up a bit of a score there. Whether he's going to be priced cheaply enough to have enough upside and whether it could last long enough, I'm a bit hesitant on, but I think it's just still one to monitor.
Yeah, so projected price for Ben Long here, 486k, and then Berry, 271k. So again, you'd probably want to see something pretty decent in the season to really look at look at them as an option. Got it finally out.
Yeah.
Jack Bowes obviously is out. Corbett and Isaac Rankin. I don't really think that has any fantasy effect on really anyone. So we will move on to GWS. So Toby Bedford obviously moving from Melbourne to GWS to try and get games. Projected price at 339k. That it's for me. I look at that price and that sort of looks to me potentially like a Tyson Stengel, where no one really looked in because he's a bit more than the sort of the top draft pick than your rookies, but could maybe pump out some good scores. Obviously, GWS aren't as strong as what Geelong were, so that's obviously a factor. But is there any sort of potential preseason watch list that you guys are doing with Toby Bedford, or are you just sort of taking a pass on just moving on?
Yeah, save your breath, I think.
Yeah.
Don't worry about him.
Just not going to get the supply that Stengel would, and Stengel's probably got a better role where he pushes further up the ground. Bedford's going to be stuck in a forward pocket with the likes of Toby Green pushing up the ground.
Yeah, I think I'm sure we'll talk about some of these exits, but the interesting thing for me is how much midfield time Toby Green gets with the likes of Jacob Hopper and Tim Taranto moving on. I wonder if he gets a few more CBAs and someone like a Bedford becomes more of an option for that reason. But at this stage, I tend to agree with you boys. But I do think because of the outs at GWS, there's a little bit of interest for me just at what that mix looks like.
Yeah. So we'll move on to that. So Tanner Bruhn obviously wasn't so much in the midfield mix, a little bit, but not too much. But obviously Jacob Hopper, Tim Taranto have obviously both moved to the Tigers, and Bobby Hill is out. Who do we see being the big beneficiary? Is it Josh Kelly? Is it Tom Green? Is it, as you mentioned, Toby Green, Jake? Who is going to be the big beneficiary and potentially the best option out of those guys that maybe be underpriced?
I'd say all of the above.
Yep, all of the above.
Yeah, I somehow managed to pick Josh Kelly every year, so I'm sure I'll pick him again next year.
As do I. I think the other two that should have upside that you didn't list are Lockie Ash and Perryman. I think Perryman might be the one that gets a little bit more inside time, and that might allow Ash to push further up on the ground and get onto a wing and actually bump his score by 10, 15 points as well. But
I think almost any GWS player that has fantasy relevance is going to get a bump here, because it means that someone like a Whitfield's role becomes more secure because an Ash and a Perryman probably push up. And I think the flow-on effect's massive. I think I'd like to have a few GWS players in my side this year, pending their status announcements, whether they're mids only, mid forward, defender mids. But if any of those guys get their dual position status, I think.
And it's a big preseason watch with the new coach as well to see what system they start running. Right, if they go to something like a Richmond or Collingwood where they're running and getting the ball through, then it's a lot less interest for me. But if they're going to play a chip mark game style and rely on the accuracy of their kicking and chip it around the halfback flank like they were doing in the second half of this year, then I would be all in on a lot of GWS players.
Yeah, Tom Green's the one that sort of stands out to me, him being the cheapest. He'll be priced at 84.9. I could see upside there. We did see the upside in the first sort of 4 or 5 rounds of this season just gone. So he's obviously one there. Cogs, maybe if he keeps forward status, that's obviously going to be one. I know he played a lot of midfield. I don't think personally he'll keep it. I think he'll be a mid only because he played so much midfield in the second half, but that will be one to watch. And obviously, as we mentioned, any of other names there. So it'll just be one to watch in the preseason, I think. And yeah, I think that's it. So we'll move on to Hawthorne. So Carl Amon, I guess we can all agree, draft relevant, a decent sort of mid-round pick as one of your last mid spots or something like that.
Potentially could be sort of interested there. So I reckon, Amon's a very fantasy relevant type of player. Like he just doesn't play AFL; he plays fantasy. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
like he scores well. Yeah.
No, I get what you mean.
The ceiling on some of those scores, he had a couple of 38 disposal games, 15 marks. I think he racked up 140, 150 a couple of times this year. So the ceiling, Tom Mitchell out, it really intrigues me, and probably with the money they're paying him too, how they're gonna employ him. Again, he's priced almost at 100, I think, which is concerning. And
810K,
So it makes it hard to start with him, but I think there's no doubt he has upside in the Hawks side, and they bring him in for a reason, unlike Port, who seem to be pretty happy with or without him in the side.
He's a watch.
Yeah, I think he's more of more of a draft watch than a classic watch for me. I think that I would rather pay 30 or 40K more and get one of the fallen underpriced premiums that have shown that they can do a 110, 115 season than someone who's coming off a career best season, moving to a new club with a relatively new coach and a very young team around him.
That's fair.
And my guy Tom Mitchell, he's going to be about that price, if not, I think about 5 or 6K cheaper from projected price. What is it? So Mitchell 808. So yeah, 2K cheaper. So yeah, just saying. And then Lloyd Meek comes in. So this is obviously interesting. So he's quite cheap. Didn't necessarily set the world on fire as a solo ruck, but the opportunity at Hawthorne will be there potentially. But obviously Reeves and Lynch there. Any sort of guess as to how this could play out, or again just pre-season watch and we'll see how Hawthorne roll with their rucks?
See if I can get Sanch on the phone, see if he can point us in the right direction back. But no, your guess is as good as mine at this point. They've got rucks galore and none of them particularly standing out to me. So I think they could rotate through the season like they did this year. So I don't think anyone's relevant just purely on job security.
I think Meek, personally, as a Freo man and having watched Meek, I think he's a better ruckman than the two that they currently have, but I don't know if that will mean that he splits at 60-40 or whether he gets a solo gig. He never really had the solo ruck duties at Freo. He was always coming in when Darcy was injured and needed a bit more of a chop out rather than them resting Darcy completely.
I like Reezy. from the young tall bloke. I think he's real good. Good tap ruckman. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the job next year, and Meek chops out. Like you don't know which way they're going to go, and they'll probably change halfway.
Yeah.
Well, I probably should have read the couple of comments that people put in start. So apologies for that. Moonboy LFG Bales. I won't quite say the middle because don't want to get video taken down or anything like that. Shannon Page, hey, off-season commitment. Yeah, mate, I'm always on the fantasy stuff. Always. So, Moonboy, hi, Moonboy, how you going? Jace Design with the flame emojis, and he also asked for this one. So this brings Cooper Stevens sort of into the mix here, and obviously he's 369k projected price, obviously with more opportunity at the Hawks. And then Jace Design, which Hawks mids do we look at now? Newcomb, Stevens, Ward, Warple. Who of those mids are you guys keeping a close eye on, or potentially all of them?
I think you're right with all of them. Ward was the one that intrigued me the last few weeks of the year. Seemed to have the most consistent role, and he was pumping out some scores. There were a couple of times I looked at his score at half time, and I was just wondering, why didn't you do that for the first 8 weeks while you're in my side, mate? He's really interesting. I think Newcomb's probably up there in price now. I think he's, tackling machine. He probably played full-time mid anyway, so I don't know that there's particularly massive upside in role. I think it probably stays the same. I don't know what you boys think. I'm not sold that Stevens goes straight into that side. I'm intrigued because Mitchell and Jago are out, gives opportunity, but is he good enough? I just haven't seen enough of him, to be perfectly honest.
I think he's good enough, and he'll probably get the outside time. Whereas they'll probably keep Ward and Newcomb more on the inside. If he's best 22, he's definitely one to consider starting. He'll be 100k above rookie price. Definitely enough upside there. I agree that Ward is the one that I've been watching. I mean, you look at his first half of the season, second half of the season splits, you can see that there's 20, 25 points nearly of upside there as a mid-pricer. And the opportunity is just there with Jago Mira and Titch both out. Like, if you have Ward in a keeper league, you're absolutely laughing right about now.
So the other one there, Newcomb, he's going to be the number one guy in there now. If he wasn't last year already, can he push 110, 115?
I just don't see where the extra score is going to come from, because he's basically capped in the number of tackles that he's getting. I can't see him getting any more possessions with them being less experienced in the middle. So he'd have to try and get on the end of some +6s. And I don't see the Hawks being able to control the ball enough to be able to do that.
I think he was the main CBA guy, so I don't think he gained extra mid-time. Warple is interesting, but there's no way I'm touching him with a 10-foot pole until I see a few more weeks. Because the thing is, we've seen him as a pure mid, and we know that based on last year, he's going to be underpriced. But their willingness to throw him into anything and everything scares the daylights out of me, to be honest. Some of the scores last year were awful.
He feels very much like a Paddy Dow, where he's shown that he can score, but he just gets thrown everywhere because they just don't know what the hell to do with him.
Well, Jace is on to another name up here that we didn't think of. Dylan Moore, forward status. Is he an interesting option up forward now with potentially lack of options in the forward line?
If he gets mid-time, if he is pushing 65, 70, 75% CBAs, then he's one to consider. But if he's getting 50-50 split, then it's hard, because I can see the Hawks easily being the Spooners this year. And that's, I think, what they're trying to go for. They're obviously committed to a rebuild, and kudos to them. They've got the draft picks to do that. They're trying to blood the youth through, but he needs to be in there a lot for me to consider him.
And Bales, I mean, I'm sure you can have a look for us, but I made a joke halfway through the year. I called him No Floor Dylan Moore on the show because scores throughout the whole season. I don't think he'll be underpriced. I think he's already going to be priced high 80s, if not 90. I would be at a guess, and there I just don't see the side for that reason.
Yeah, so Moore probably priced at 93.3, so he will be expensive, but you probably that's an upgrade target if you see something good from him throughout the season.
I probably look at him like Dunkley. I think he probably will be a top 6 forward. But at the same time, I'm not sure that there's upside, which is what you want from any player in your starting side.
Yeah, no,
Agreed.
definitely agree. And then Jack Gunston was the other one that left. That probably just pushes another player in the forward line. So we just sort of don't really know who that'll be. We'll find out pre-season. So Melbourne, Brady Grundy's in. Obviously, we don't really need to delve in too much. Gorn and Grundy were just not touching. Simple as that. I think Jason put up a stat with Dean Cox and Newey's averages for the years they played together, and he said he sees it similar to what they averaged, I think, in Cox's third to last season. And I think went at around 90, and I think Nat Newey went 75, just off the top of my head. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm assuming that we are just not touching either.
I think the interesting one to watch will be if either of them gets DPP through the season.
I think Gawn, he can score around the ground, so I think he's the most likely to move. I don't see Grundy as a forward, but I can definitely see Gawn floating in the forward line or on in the back line, to be honest. So if he gets DPP, I'd be very intrigued. But they're both going to be overpriced to start the year based on this year. So
so Joe's design said Dean Cox went at 100, Nat Newey went at 86. They combined for about 186. So he said that's maybe where he sees them going. We tend to agree as well.
Yeah.
So, but definitely not touching either. As you said though, one could get forward status and then maybe potentially becomes interesting there. Josh Shackey, that for me is just a depth signing, and then Lockie Hunter, a good draft pick. I think he's getting than what he's been priced at last year, and I think he can get back to decent scores. But you can touch him in classic, and then in terms of players that left, obviously out, Grundy's in, straight swap there. Sam Wiedemann, he only played a few games, not really too much there. And then Toby Bedford was sort of only played sub, and then Jaden Hunt was in the team, but they've got plenty of guys that can go back. Actually, no, the one thing that Lockie Hunter does probably help Angus Brayshaw. That maybe makes him a pure mid/defender role. Is he potentially someone that you'll be keeping on your high on your defender targets?
Probably same kind of view as Dylan Moore. I think he ended up having a great year. His average will be quite high, therefore he's priced at probably what I see him. I agree. I think he then probably stays as a half backer rather than going back to the wing. I think straight away, but I don't really see upside for the start of the year. Although could he be top 6 with a permanent role? Yeah, he probably could.
He's priced just priced at 99.1. He'll come in as one of the top 6 defenders on price based off of average last year. I don't have enough confidence that he would be getting the role in the midfield throughout the entire season to be able to start him, but it's definitely one to watch for the second half of the year. He'd probably one, if he does have that midfield role, he's definitely one that you'll want in your team by the end of the year.
Yeah, I can almost guarantee that I won't start with him.
North Melbourne. So Griffin Logue, not really an option. Potentially you could take a flyer and draft. He could score decent enough, but not obviously classic relevant. But Darcy Tucker, though, however, will be cheap. Obviously, he'll probably keep defender stats. He didn't play really much at all last season. Is he someone that's going to be on the watch list as a defender? So I'm just getting up his projected price here. But go ahead if anyone wants to jump in with Darcy Tucker.
I love
definitely one.
I got no idea what he's going to do over there, but I'll definitely look at him when it gets closer. I just think he's always worth a look. I'm
worried that he'll lose defender status. Considering most of the time when he came into the team, he was playing kind of a midfield / halfback rotation. I'm not sure he will have had enough time down back to hold it, but not sure. I think either way, though, he's one that I would be really considering. He's in the right age bracket. He provides a really big body, which they need for their young midfielders. And there's enough upside with him being priced at 50.
Yep. Price at 433k as well. So especially if it's defender as well, that's really definitely put on your watch list there. And then so Jason on front, that's the big mega trade that they were talking about. Probably just opens up a few CBAs that Hornfronts was getting. The one that obviously I'm keeping a big Thomas. Obviously, that's the one that's cheap and has done it in the past. Anyone else from North, maybe the midfield mix that is a consider, or is Thomas obviously the obvious one?
Oh, he's the
Will Phillips.
yes, Will Phillips, yeah, he'd be really cheap. He'd be near back,
Yeah.
I think.
What about LDU?
Yeah. Again, I think LDU is a very similar one to Newcomb. I just don't see how much more he can go up. He's already been getting the inside time. He's been getting tons of tackles, getting in the chip mark. He was pushing 110 in the second half of the season. There's maybe a couple of points of upside. If you think you can push top 8, then maybe want to consider starting.
Yeah,
I'd like him more than Newcomb.
Yeah, I think what you said there was probably the key. I think the back half of the season, his start to the year was pretty average. So I think he's going to be 3 to 5 points unders based on that alone. And with JHF out, the year under belt, I think he can definitely continue the mantle. So I think there's definitely a position for him. I think all the guys you mentioned are options. I know Darcy Tucker was in my preseason side for a lot of 2022, to be perfectly honest, and only late with some of those changes.
Yeah, same.
Not squeezing. So I think all of those guys definitely relevant, definitely worth a minimum on the watch list.
Simpkin as well. He's always worth it.
Yeah.
I'll do it again.
Yeah.
No,
I'll be doing it again.
James had to say it. James Simpkins, your guy, mate. It's your guy.
I love him.
Yeah.
Wouldn't surprise me if he is the number 1 averaging player next year. I just got a feeling it could go well.
That is a huge call.
Early cry.
For James's sake, can you clip that out? I know it's live.
Yeah. We'll definitely be able to clip it. We'll see what happens. But you never know. You never know.
I'll definitely live to regret that one, I think.
To be fair to Simpkin, he only had 3 games that were real stinkers. And
felt like a lot more.
He
felt like a lot more.
CBA player in the competition, though. So you would expect having those 46s in his repertoire, to be honest.
But yeah, Joseph's on today. Yeah, mate, you go.
I was just going to, based off of what Jason's just said as well, LDU's priced at 93. It's crazy to me that Simpkin is priced higher than LDU, given I felt like LDU had a better season than Simpkin.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But yeah, Will Phillips be priced about 31. Jason's on saying here, so that's definitely really cheap if he's in the team. So that puts him. I don't know if that's basement, but certainly very, very basement. Port Adelaide. So at the home stretch here, only a few teams to go. So Jason Horne-Francis comes in. Obviously, I know, gosh, Jason Horne-Francis is a real good target in keeper league drafts. In terms of fantasy, in terms of classic and that, I probably don't think we'd draft. Obviously, you can put a flyer on that. But what do we see Horne-Francis being? More of a forward going for a few CBAs, or what are we projecting he may do?
I can't see him knocking the likes of the Butters, Rosies out of the rotation yet. I think they're going to want to give him forward time, like they did with those boys, for another year or two. Now they're a bit bigger bodied. Now they can the guts, and then in 2 years that Jason Horne-Francis will probably take over the mantle. Boak's retired and Lyons is getting to the tail end of his career, and then that's a bloody exciting midfield if I was a Port fan, to be honest. But not this year. There's just too much talent, and let him learn his craft for another year or two, I think.
Yeah, he'll get a quarter every so often in there, run through, but he won't be consistent.
Yeah, he'll get, same with the other boys, like 3 or 4 CBAs a game, something like that.
Yeah,
I think the loser is probably Boak. I think that he gets pushed out more, probably try and push him forward a bit more to reduce the stress on his body, and then Butters, Rosie, and Horne-Francis probably take up a bit more mid load.
We did see a bit with Lyons this year, mind you. They were sliding him forward as a bit of a target just because he's got a good overhead mark. Hurt for a bit, so I think the same thing could happen again this year. But all the young boys, it's like I said, it's an exciting watch, but I don't know that any of them become enticing fantasy prospects.
Yeah, the one that I'm definitely keeping an eye on is Connor Rosie, if he keeps forward status, because Junior Rioli's there as well. He's obviously come in. You got Orazio Fantasia. Who knows if he's going to stay fit? He never has been able to stay fit, but if he does, that's another forward. I think Rosie will play more midfield, but do we see him keeping forward status? He did play mid round 7 or so onwards. So what do we think?
Yeah, I don't think so. Mid only.
I think it's unlikely, and I think Butters is probably the one that's more likely to keep it because he just kept getting injured and kept getting shoved forward.
So true.
Are we going back to the well?
I am interested, but I think it depends on what other forward options there are that exist there. I mean, they've both shown that if they're getting 60% CBAs each, that they can both go at nearly 100 average. And if we're as dire up forward as it's looking like we might be, then he might be one of the best options to start, just because of the fact that he will be underpriced.
Yeah, no, definitely one to watch. So, interesting to see how Port Adelaide go. As a Crows fan, hopefully not as well, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. And then obviously Carl Amon is obviously left. So does that open up any sort of potential wing run at all, or not any real fantasy impact?
I'd be intrigued for guys like Riley Bonner and Dan Houston to see what that does, because they've both shown ceilings in the past, but and they both probably suit the role. So I'd be intrigued to see what it does there, but there's no obvious yes 100% on either of those guys. But I'd keep them on a watch list for that reason.
The name I'd heard floated that would push onto the wing and get a bit more of a role is Miles Bergman, but as a mid only and playing as a winger, it's 65 at most. You couldn't touch it in Classic. It's maybe just a draft flyer you take.
Does Dersma become an option? Is that he's obviously going to be very cheap because he was injured in a game early, some sub appearances. Price is 5 here, so I don't know if it'll be higher or lower, but maybe him.
Those first couple of years, when he played a little bit more than he did this season, he was coming off the wing a lot, and he wasn't putting up amazing scores. He was playing good football, but as we know, that doesn't always translate to being fantasy relevant.
Yeah, just a gut runner, but not one who demands the pill, and there's already too many mouths to feed through that Port Adelaide midfield.
Yeah,
great.
Moving on to Richmond. So this is moving forward. So Tim Taranto, he should keep forward status, and I need him to do well. I've got to move on from last year. That round 5 pick, it was horrible. I hated it. It cost me a top 1,000 spot at least, potential top 500 because I was going well besides that. But Tim Taranto, if he's a forward, I would imagine he'll play a decent more midfield time at Richmond. It's obviously. But Richmond, though, have got a cap where no players really score well. But could Taranto be the exception and come in and average 105, maybe even more? Is he going to be one of the first forwards you guys pick? If he's got forwards? What do you guys think?
It just feels like it's fraught with danger even this early on. I mean, I can't see him not being at 80% CBAs, but I think that the Richmond system is just so conducive for bad fantasy scoring. Like, they had no player go over 100 this year, and you could say that a lot of the midfield had discontinuity. Like, Prestia kept getting injured, and he's probably the one who would have been closest to pushing it. But I think the cap for him is 105, but it's just really, really hard to know.
Yeah, like genuinely, who was the last Tiger anyone can think of? You know, we're excluding Dusty from a conversation.
I've got the stat, Basher Hooley.
Basher Hooley,
2019, I believe it was. I did see it somewhere,
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say. It's not a midfielder. That's the simple fact. Rich midfielders don't do that. What is Hopper priced at? I've just been trying to find it, but my phone's a bit of a nightmare.
So Hopper was the other one. So actually, I should just get up. So Warney's with price here. So he's got Jacob Hopper. He'll be priced at about 678k. So average 66 point.
I'm more excited about that. I like the role that he plays. I like the in and under, and I think you see that in good teams where they're the elite midfielders. You see that like a 90 kind of guy, and I think he screams a couple of those mid-pricer picks this year. Paddy Cripps, Lipinski kind of guys. I think he screams upside for that reason. I think I'd be more excited. I think he has more upside on his price than Taranto does.
I agree with that. I think if Taranto has forward status, though, that's where the more enticing prospect comes in.
Yeah.
What's Taranto averaged or priced at?
So Taranto, we priced at
96.
There you go, priced at 96. So an actual price projection if I can find it. There's so because there's so many names here. No, for that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. 96. So
96. Yeah.
you wouldn't think he'd be doing much more than 100,
Yeah.
even if he's at the role. But just the way the Tigers play.
Yeah.
Whereas
I think
Hopper could be 20 unders easy.
Yeah,
about 800k.
I agree that I would agree with the statement. Taranto's more likely to be in your final side than Hopper, absolutely. But I think underpriced pick to start the year, Hopper over Taranto any day of the week.
Yeah, agree with that.
Yeah, but the one guy that's interesting is there's no outs from Richmond, but because the two midfielders come in, so Jaden Short, he's down at 98. So again, a bit like Jake, as you guys have said it as well, that he is still priced expensive, but he's going at essentially near 110 or better part of 110 for the first bit until he moved into the mid. And with those guys there, I would have to imagine that he goes back to it in defence. Is he potentially an underpriced option in defence that we could potentially look at?
The issue is he might not have defender status to start the year.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Of course, yeah, of course.
Because he played so much of the midfield and even up forward as well. A lot of the people that seem to be in the know think that he won't have defender status and that he'll be pure mid. And if he's pure mid, you definitely can't start him.
Yeah. No.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even take that into account. So thanks, Monk, for that. I didn't even think about that.
I think
St Kilda. So
we fly through these next three teams. I don't think they did anything this trade period, Baz.
Yeah, so St Kilda in Zane Cordy, not fantasy relevant. Ben Long, not obviously left, doesn't really have any effect and with St Kilda in terms of fantasy. So Jake, you're right. That's one off. That's one quick one. So Sydney, Aaron Francis, probably depth one there, or even if he's in the team, has never really averaged well. And no outs for Sydney.
I think you'll get it.
Moving swiftly on. West Coast in Jaden Hunt. You can't maybe draft. You can put him on your bench or something like that, but not touching classic. Out Junior Rioli. So any thoughts on West Coast?
Nah,
just the same.
Not in terms of the trades, but I think there will be a good couple of picks from West Coast. I'm not sure who they are, but you probably have to watch their preseason. Surely they can't come back as unfit as they were. The amount the media has bashed him, you'd think they'd actually do a preseason this year. So hopefully, they come back fit. And if they come back fit, then an Elliot Yo will look all right. That was not the right joke. He's the name that came to my head.
Was this a setup?
That wasn't
How about a Dom Sheed?
No, that's the name I was going to mention, Dom Sheed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd rather go Yo even. I mean, you never know. But those are the type of guys that potentially could be an option.
So Jason's got Sheed, price 67, so 561k. So definitely unders what he can do.
Oh, for sure. I think what's intriguing is their forward line setup. Obviously, no Kennedy, no Rioli. I'm just intrigued to see who gets those roles, whether it's a couple of rookies we can lock in early on, or whether other people get shuffled around and then we get some more opportunities through the midfield. I can see that happening too. So I think they're a one to watch as a side, like you said in the preseason. I think there'll be a couple of good underpriced picks for that reason, but no one screaming right now.
Yeah, Oscar Allen's another cheap one as well.
Yeah,
that potentially finish off your forward line or something like that. But not enough
forward,
but he could finish off your forward line. Yeah.
Not mine.
And then final one. I can see James, mate, you're tired, and I know you got to be up soon. So we'll finish off this one. So Bulldogs, Liam Jones, he'll come in, but not fantasy relevant. But the one I do want to talk about, so Rory Lobb. So for me, this just makes I'm not touching Tim English. I think that there is a little bit of value with a couple this year, and I think that English is still priced at 101. It's expensive. I don't know what you guys think, but that's just personally what I think. I'll probably go for a little bit more value in the rucks. Are you guys not really worried too much? I still think English with the number one ruck, but so you're the Bulldogs guy, Jake.
Yeah, look, I think I am not so worried. I mean, I never like to pick guys that are priced at their top, and I think English might be. So I'm concerned on that behalf, but not because of Rory Lobb. I think I was always concerned about Martin coming into the side and someone taking the number one ruck mantle. That's not what Lobb's there for. Lobb's there to pinch hit. He's there to ruck inside 50, and he's there when English is off the ground. So I don't think it'll affect his role at all. I am still 50-50 on picking him just purely because I don't know how much upside is in his 101. But I would expect him to continue to do what he did this year for that reason.
I agree with the sentiment. I think Lob's probably just wanting to play forward and then chop out every now and then. I don't think that English has upside, as you said, but I think it might mean that English pushes further back when the Dogs set up because they'll be taller up forward and they'll need his tall kind of stature down back. And he's shown that he has the athletic capacity to be able to, get the handball out the back, be able to be involved in the +6 chains around the back half, and it allow some of the smaller mids to push forward and be those coming forwards off of the tall forward line that they're probably going to have.
I think James has fallen asleep on us, mind you. So.
No, I'm okay. I was sorry. I was just reading my phone. It just said St Kilda are about to sack Ratton or part ways with him. So,
geez.
That's a bit of a news drop to leave you with.
Breaking news. There you go.
Yeah, Kaltumi's reporting it.
Wow, there you go. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then in terms of the outs for the Bulldogs, so obviously Zane Cordy, not really too much an effect there. Josh Shackey, not too much effect. But the sort of the two that could be an effect, so Lockie Hunter, obviously out. Josh Dunkley out. Obviously, Jason's on put in the chat there as well. McLean, price 45, 377k forward. I think he probably should have said he was the biggest lock because he scored 100 in the. But with Dunkley out, does this make Jack McRae be the guy again, or can we just not trust him after what we saw last year?
Look, I think it does. I have no issues with McRae. I think he's probably going to be underpriced. McLean, as you said, I've been screaming out the game that he put up in the elimination final, and as a fantasy player, he's shown in the past. So with these guys out, I think if he keeps his body fit, he's hands down got to be one of the best picks to start the year with. Someone like Riley West, just not quite as fantasy relevant, but I think he probably gets a little bit time through the wing and through the mid as well, and he's looked really good. So I think there's going to be opportunities in the Doggies side. It'll be really interesting to see how that pans out. But those are the two names that scream yes to me, and I think every other player, Treloar, Bailey Smith's an interesting one just because of how hot and cold he ended up being with roll, but I think his roll becomes more consistent. So I think all the guys get, similar to GWS, maybe like a 5-point bump based on the outs, with a couple of guys maybe really benefiting on the bottom end.
Yeah.
What about a Bont?
I think Bont's role is always where it is. It's going to be 60-70% through the guts, and then he's going to slide forward and he's going to kick goals, and he's going to have an opportunity there, and that gives us the chance to go other guys in the CBAs. I don't think his role changes awfully much.
Yeah. So, just quickly, do you think, I don't know what you guys think, but I think the Dogs will seriously bounce back and be a strong team again.
I agree.
So if they're being a stronger team, you think they're going to kick more goals, you think Bond's going to kick more goals, you think he'd get a bit of a increase there. Is that how you guys think as well, or not really?
I think he'd kicked a goal, I think 12 out of the first 14 games. I think he was averaging 1.3 goals a game at some point. I think we almost relied on him too much this year.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't know that he necessarily gets the bump, to be honest. I mean, look, your guess is probably as good as mine with that one. I don't think he's kicking more goals, but the thing is, he's scoring one way or another. He's either impacting through the guts or he's having the chance scoring up forward. And the thing is, it really depends on what we need on any given day, and that's why I've never had the Bond in my side, just because the flexibility with him is so key, and the targets that he gets put on his back for the same reason is always a challenge. So,
Yeah.
I tend of us being
the other one I'd.
By the way, a big thanks.
Yeah, Monk,
there's just one more name I wanted to flag, which was Ed Richards. Do you think he can push up onto that wing with Hunter coming out and get a bit more of a prominent role, or do you think he's just going to still sit across half-back?
I think he looks too good on half-back for my thoughts. The interesting thing is how they deploy Bailey Dale, Ed Richards, and Caleb Daniel. I'd say one of them light up a little bit. Jason Johannesson gets an extension. I don't think he's the best forward in the world. Does he look at getting the wing role? There's a chance. A lot of names to keep an eye on, and I think they're all fantasy scorers, but I don't think there's a massive uptick for any of them. I think even if the role shifts slightly, it's probably going to be comparable to where they ended up this year.
Yeah.
How many Bulldogs are you picking in your take at this early stage? How many do you think you'll have?
I think I might have 2 at this point in time. So.
Then
McLean is
Aaron
one.
That'll change.
Yeah.
That'll get up. That will bump up. 5 or 6.
Aaron Delaporte commented on the from the video and said Jake will pick Cordy when he plays the Dogs.
I love Aaron. You're a good lad, mate, and that's a
good guy.
I saw, if you look at Callum Wilkie's score when the Saints played the Dogs, Hunter Clark's score when the Saints played the Dogs, Zane Cordy's got to be a lock.
Funny. And then Cuz Judd, his forward line that he'd have at the moment, he's got Dunkley, Taranto, Moore, and McLean. So paying for a bit for those top 3. But I guess if Dunkley has got forward status, he's probably going to go on a lot of teams. I think Taranto could be very similar as well. So any final thoughts that we maybe didn't go over in any of the teams at all?
I think just quickly on Dunkley into the Lions that it might help Neil and McCluggage out in terms of having another extractor for the ball. Means that they're not the only one who's getting kind of having to do all the hard yards in there, and they can share it around a bit, kind of similar to how the Dogs did a couple of years back where Bontempelli, Dunkley, McRae all went huge. I could easily see that happening with those 3. They've got the diverse kind of spread of skills to be able to do that.
Well, I know Jet was saying about McCluggage. He was saying, "Am I not the only one that thinks McCluggage will benefit from Dunkley in there?" And I do agree. I think McCluggage will benefit. Jake, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that I probably hardly agree. And I think the interesting one again this year is going to be the ruck line. It was something no one had to really think about in previous years. We now look set and forget crowd. I mean, good big shout out to Holmesy, but I don't think he's going to be screaming from the hills this time around. And I really have no idea what I'm going to be doing in those positions. So I think that's going to be a key, and I think that's going to be the decider of the 2023 fantasy season. So I think put your time and effort into the rucks, and if you can find a nice pairing, it's going to be a really good leg up this year.
Well, I'll ask you a quick question before as the last sort of thing. Who do you guys currently have? Just sort of early thoughts as your 2 rucks that you would have.
For me, it's Rowan Marshall and Riley O'Brien.
That's interesting. I have Rowan Marshall and blank, to be perfectly honest. There is not. I like a cheaper R2 option. I've done the rookie ruck the last 2 years. I don't know if anyone's going to fit the mold, but I think with the question marks, I'm very comfortable that if someone's appealing in the rookie or just above rookie priced, I'll be going down that avenue because no one else screams to me that they are must-haves.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they all sound decent options. I haven't given it a second thought, to be honest. But Rowan Marshall, probably the way he's finished off last year, if he's got the spot by himself, then it's probably too good a pick. But no idea.
Yeah. Marshall and Meek was probably there, but Darcy Cameron's definitely one that I'm giving a bit of thought. I think he's underpriced. He's definitely one that I'll be keeping there. Appreciate as well House of Flex. Thanks for this the subscribe. I did see a couple of people unsubscribe on the off season, so but that's fine. We'll hopefully get back into stuff. But no, thanks boys for jumping. Actually, no, 528. We actually went up I think 3 tonight. Much appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do. We're trying to hit 1,000 subs, so that all helps much. Appreciate. Make sure you like the video as well if you enjoyed seeing a bit of early fantasy content. But yeah, boys, thanks for jumping on. James, thanks mate for coming on work early tomorrow mornings, and you had a big day at work again today. So thanks for jumping. Where can the guys? I know you don't tweet. I know you don't tweet too much. The guys find you on Twitter, because I'm sure they want to come to the second overall coach from last year.
Oh yeah, I am at Shuckers Fantasy, but yeah, I mean it's the off season. Don't really use it too much these days, but
yeah. No, go give James a follow. Monk, where can the guys find the 39th overall coach? I forgot to. I remember to say it this time instead of in the group chat where I said James second overall Monk.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MiniMonk10.
Yep. And then Jake, where can the guys find you? Where can they find the pod? And then also, have we got potential start date or rumoured to be with Hatchat when the pods become back?
Oh, look, I'll start off first of all with what Nathan commented on Twitter. We love the banter with us off season. He asked why you didn't put my overall rank in the in the title or in the video, mate. But on my end, I appreciate that you didn't do that. The guys for now can find me at Dunkley's Donuts. I'm still undecided if I keep the name. Now my boy has left, but that is the persona after all. So make sure you follow Quick if you want to stay on that. You can find the guys and I at Hatchat AFL. And last year, that's all I can go by, we did release 4 pre-Christmas pods running through positions all through the month of December. That's been discussed this year, but with everyone, DC getting married, my bubs and the other boys being engaged, I think we're all giving time back to our families. So I'd say keep an eye out in December. There'll be more announcements and hopefully some content for everyone then and there, mate. So thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely keep an eye on all the content stat. But I think was it DC the one that mentioned Billings Bagels potentially as a name for you?
Mate,
Billings Bagels.
There's been some pretty good ones. I did cop that 0 this year, and look, keep it on Twitter. If anyone thinks of any amusing names, I'm having a good laugh at them all. So send them my way. We'll all get some laughs in before the season starts.
Dunkley's
that was just the one that popped it. There you go.
Right, love it.
The Billings Bagels was the one that just stuck in my head. And also potential new podcast for me coming out as well. So just stay tuned for maybe some special guests that will be coming on for that. So stay tuned. I'll keep everyone up to date with that. But no, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for the guys for jumping on. If you live on the or on live, thank you for tuning in live. If you're watching on the replay, appreciate support and everything, and subscribe, do all that sort of good stuff. Follow all the social media, everyone here and myself. Catch you guys probably either just for Christmas or after Christmas or before the season starts. So we'll catch you guys then. So have a good one, and we'll see you then. We're out. Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.